Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is Open Class episodes in which we answer questions from the community. And I know we're a little bit behind. Some of these questions are from like late December, so sorry about that. But we still try to answer every single question that comes into Open Class. At some point, that probably won't be possible, but we're still doing that. And when we can't anymore, well, we'll figure that one out then. And before we start, just a quick announcement here that if you are thinking of a new career path, a new path in life, perhaps, maybe you're thinking about becoming a sleep coach, guess what? February 15th is when our next cohort starts. And you can just head over to our website and check the banner at the top if you want to learn more. All right, so with that said, let us jump in here and answer some questions from the community. As always, nothing is medical advice, just my general thoughts that I hope will help anyone who wrote a question, submitted a question, or anyone who tunes in. So yeah, let us take a look. First, actually, we have not so much of a question, but really some words of wisdom from Andrew. This is what he wrote recently. So Andrew says, "Hi, Daniel and Michelle. I thought you might like my take on befriending wakefulness to discuss or comment on in a video. Best wishes for the new year. Thank you." Andrew said this again. Okay, I think people can get confused that befriend wakefulness is kind of an order or a requirement to feel a certain way. But it's not like that at all. It's simply a guide to what actions to take and not a requirement to have a certain feeling. You cannot decide to feel friendly or have pleasant feelings about wakefulness or a person or anything else. Our feelings aren't under our control like that. Our actions, though, are much more under our control. So when in bed, awake, feeling anxious, etc., do an action that someone who was awake and feeling content would do. Listen to some music, read something you like, or your hobby, etc., with no expectations of a change in how you feel. Then over time, weeks, your brain will adjust its feelings to match. It will associate being awake in the night with doing interesting, pleasant activities for which the correct feelings are positive ones and not anxious ones. The key point is that you cause this to happen by doing this while you continue to feel anxious. Continuing to feel anxious, even for the rest of the night, doesn't mean you have done anything wrong. Do the thing, and when you notice you still feel anxious, or start checking how you feel, or measure how long it's been, or think about how you'll feel tomorrow, or wonder when, if ever, you'll recover, etc., as you certainly will, just gently return yourself back to your activity. Each gentle release and return is a tiny rewiring of the brain, your recovery happening right there and then. Um, yeah, I have little to add to this. I have little to add to this. I think this is very, very nicely put by Andrew. I think this is a very, very helpful way of looking at befriending wakefulness, and it takes time. And I think the only addition to this is like if anything feels like very forced to you, if it doesn't, if sometimes uh, reading a book or listening to some a podcast or something, if it feels false, if it just doesn't feel right to you, then maybe that's not what befriending wakefulness is to you. Maybe it's just resting. Maybe it's something else. But yeah, everything Andrew says I think is so true and so helpful. And just know that when you feel like maybe the only thing I would add is like if anything feels pushed or forced to you, then maybe take a little bit of a gentler path. Maybe there's something a little gentler you can do. But yeah, just words of wisdom from Andrew, really. Super glad to hear those. And here's a live question from Udayaniti. Probably not saying that right, but I hope I'm not too far off. Okay, here's the live question. I always have a thought in my mind that nothing is going to make me sleep, and my brain tells me to give up, but I couldn't. Yeah, this is this is I think when I hear something like this, then I'm like, this person is really close to abandoning the struggle because Udayaniti here understands on a cognitive level that there's nothing we can do to make ourselves sleep. And that if we kind of give up this attempt, if we just don't try to do that, it will just happen by itself. But uh, but Udini says, but I couldn't. I couldn't kind of give up these attempts to try to make myself sleep. And the thing with that is that nobody can. It's something we don't have like willful control over our thoughts like that. We can't decide to stop trying to sleep, for example. It is something that happens to us. It's something we experience passively. So I would say like you have the understanding that is amazing, and just having reached a point where you can think, I'm not going to do anything, that's amazing, because naturally we want to do something, right? So just having that understanding is amazing. And when that doesn't happen, when you find yourself kind of like still trying, still hoping, still wanting, etc., then just deploy kindness and just be like, that's natural, that's normal, nothing strange with that. And guess what? When we're no longer trying not to try, it happens all by itself. That is what I would like to add here to this live comment. All right. So I hope that made sense, and let me know if it didn't. Um, Udayaniti. And with that said, let's jump from Andrew's words of wisdom to some questions from Nathan. Let's read this. Nathan says, "Hey Daniel, so it's been like 4 months since the sleeping problem began, and I still get 1 or 2 hours, even if I'm not depressed or anxious. It's still very challenging to go to sleep and sleep longer when I do sleep. I've noticed I make little groaning or grunting noises when I try to sleep. Sometimes I jerk, but not a lot. LOL. I really hope that the LSD I took is going to make me. I think what Nathan mentioned, I hope the LSD I took is not going to make me have this terrible disease. I think that's a reference to SFI. Which, since it's been 4 months since then, does it mean that I don't have it? Maybe I would have had other symptoms happening before the lack of sleep started happening. And I was just wondering if having a fever and having a headache are associated with SFI. I also have ED. I think that's erectile dysfunction, like I mentioned before. And since I'm typing all this fine, most likely that means I don't have it. But I like to make sure. It's also weird because I don't really get tired as much as I used to. I mean, I sometimes do, but not as much as I used to. Also, I get depressed some days, but not like all days. Even when I'm on my Alexa Pro, I still kind of get depressed for no reason. But not as much. I was wondering if that has any links to SFI, or if anything, I'm saying has links to SFI. I found out that people with ADHD and autism, which have both, struggle with sleep. So maybe I'm just back to that point of it. I don't know. I copied my comment from YouTube. Sometimes when there are longer comments on YouTube, I say that you can submit this to open class, which I think is what Nathan did. Udayanithi says, "Thank you, Daniel. Lifesaver for me anytime. So glad you're here, and so glad this is helpful." And so, yeah, back to Nathan. You know, what we can see here is like the attempts of a brain to link things with sporadic fatal insomnia. And of course, this is something very scary. So it's very natural for the brain to try to figure it out and try to be safe. So it's linking like sweating with it, and like erectile dysfunction and medications and feeling, all these things are the brain's kind of trying to link this thing, which is, to me, when we see this, when we see that, oh my gosh, my brain is trying to make all these connections, then that alone can be really helpful. We can just go like, aha, my brain is in like problem solving mode. And, we can let it do its thing, but we don't need to necessarily take it that seriously when it does. Whatever it comes up with is just ideas, suggestions, thoughts, like there's sentences in the brain. We don't need to take them seriously. And so uh, there were so many things that we could comment on here, but one thing that really struck me in Nathan's comment was, uh, I'm still finding it hard to sleep, and hard to sleep long when I do sleep. So Nathan is expressing that it's difficult, it's hard to achieve sleep, and when sleep happens, it's hard to make it last for a long time. And also when he's trying to sleep, there's grunting and groaning. And so what this describes to us is really effort. This tells us of somebody who has an idea that sleep can be achieved somehow, and that we should try. And sometimes we also have the idea that sometimes sometimes the trying works. So when Nathan, or someone like Nathan, sleeps and has tried a lot of things, then the idea becomes like, oh, this time the trying worked, but it's hard because I had to try so many things to achieve this. When in reality, the way I see it is that sleep is always a passive process. If you tried like 22 things and then you sleep, it means that finally, finally the tryings kind of went, stopped. Like there was finally less trying and sleep could happen. But the interpretation can be like, one of the things I tried worked. So it can be a little bit confusing like that. But again, like we talked about just before, with awareness of how the brain is trying to connect things, we can also deploy awareness here. That we can play awareness like, aha, I have had this thought, or there's been this thought in my brain that one can achieve sleep, that one can try, and that it can be hard. But that's not really the case, actually. Sleep is passive, it happens by itself. It cannot really be hard. It's as if to say, like, it's really hard to make myself think, but that doesn't kind of make sense because thoughts just happen all by themselves. So how can it be hard? Same thing with sleep, actually. It can only be hard if we're trying. If we're not trying, nothing that we aren't trying can be hard, right? So just being aware of those things can help. And then we saw from Nathan here that he was saying something like, I still don't feel sleepy or tired. It can seem really odd. It can seem really odd when you sleep little and then you're not particularly tired. You're kind of actually quite vigilant. And to me, that's just a sign of like normal hyperarousal when we're in this kind of, there's some sense of fear in the brain, some sort of worry in the brain. And that makes us, makes us exist in this kind of like safety mode. Then we often feel quite alert, even if we sleep little. And when we see that that's not strange or usual, and we don't try to fix that or problem solve around that, that leads to like the hyperarousal fading. Now, finally here, the questions of like, I think there's one of the big questions here is like trying to figure out if Nathan is kind of trying to figure out if he may have this very rare genetic conditions called sporadic fatal insomnia or fatal familial insomnia. And I think having had some trouble for like months, yes, that can be something that, again, nothing here is medical advice, but these things are kind of rapidly progressing. So somebody's had something for 4 months, it's unlikely to be one of these prion diseases. But more importantly to me is that when it comes to these rare prion diseases, genetic prion diseases, then they're not like fear of not sleeping is not part of it. It's insomnia isn't part of it at all. They are not at all insomnia. Insomnia is when we are scared of not sleeping, and that keeps us awake. But when you read about people who've had Creutzfeldt-Jacobs, or even people who have Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, SFI, there's no component of like fear of not sleeping. In fact, it's not insomnia at all. It's like neurological conditions. So I think that's very helpful to know about. Hope that helped, Nathan, and let us know how things go. And with this said, let's continue to our next message, which is from Dana. Let's read this. Hi, Coach Daniel. I'm so grateful that I found your channel, as the worst of my insomnia is already over. This is music to my ears. So glad to hear this. I just have a few more questions about some recent bumps I'm experiencing lately. Number one, how do I utilize the timeless window when most of the things I enjoy doing involve the internet? Two, I don't try to control my sleep anymore most of the time, and that's helped me get over the worst of my insomnia. But I notice whenever I have trouble sleeping, it's because I'm still trying to control other aspects of my life. How do I make it easier to let go of controlling things in my life as a whole? Do I just let everything be chaotic and remember YOLO? Question mark. I still miss the feeling of nodding off, kind of sleepy. It's just so rare for me nowadays. Even if I have had little sleep for several days, I think I know well enough how to sleep, even if coming from an aroused state. But because of that, I never got to uncouple the bed with my aroused state. And consequently, I still experience fragmented sleep. The thing is, doing things I enjoy doesn't make me sleepy. And sometimes I just want to lie in bed to rest my back for a much longer time. I don't think I've been trying hard to sleep, nor have I been trying hard to not to try hard. But I guess in the back of my mind or subconsciously, I still slightly bothers me. Is this because of number two, which kind of implies that I'm not completely satisfied with my life just yet? Lots of insight here, a lot of insight. I think we will go over question one, question two, and then maybe go back to this message and look at some details around question number three. All right, let's do this. So question number one was the timeless sleep window. The idea behind the timeless sleep window is that, knowing the time and checking the time and calculating, that's all part of like trying to control or have some sense of control. And it's always really when we no longer try to control sleep or our emotions that things become nice and peaceful, right? So then the question is, so the idea behind the time sleep window is like you can do something like this, a sort of practical step on your path to abandoning the struggle completely is to just be like, okay, I'm going to get up at 6:30 a.m. no matter what. I have my alarm set, and I'm going to stop knowing the time at, let's say, 10. From 10 p.m. till 6:30, I don't know the time, and if I feel like I want to be in bed, I go there and whatnot. Just keep it timeless. And then very often this question comes up, but if everything I like to do that I enjoy doing, it involves like a screen. So I will know the time even if I don't want to know the time. So uh, the way I think we can approach this situation are, okay, number one, sometimes it can help to just take a little piece of tape, like a black tape or something, and put onto that part of your screen where the time is displayed. Many of my clients and followers here have mentioned that they did that and that was helpful to them, so that can help. But sometimes it isn't that easy. Sometimes the time pops up here and there, and you see it, and then the question can become like, so should I maybe just try to avoid anything that has a time on it? Maybe I should do things like just read a book, even though I don't like reading a book that much. Maybe it's more helpful for me to do that, or is another path? Well, I think, one thing that's always good to remember is that there's no requirement for peaceful sleep or peace of mind. So none of this is really important. But what we choose to do can lead us to kind of abandoning the struggle more or less easily. Let's put it that way. So if the idea of doing something that doesn't involve a screen or a time, like reading a book or doing something creative like drawing or something like that, if that has some appeal to you, if you're like, I think that could actually be nice, then that may be a nice path. But let's say it really isn't. Like the only thing that you actually enjoy is like watching some Netflix or checking YouTube or something like that. Well, guess what? Then you can actually turn things around, and you can sort of exploit the emotions and the thoughts that happen when you learn the time to your advantage. What do I mean by this? Well, you turn it into like an introspective process, if you will. So let's say it's you don't know what time it is, and you're like, but I want to do something I enjoy. I want to watch Netflix. You turn on Netflix and you see that it's like it's 1:35 a.m. Let's say. Then you pay attention. You pay attention to how that makes you feel. Does your brain automatically start calculating? Then you deploy the aha there. Then you go like, aha, my brain is trying to figure things out. It's trying to calculate, to have control. Aha, I see what you're doing there, brain. Or does knowing the time just spark anxiety? You just feel anxiety, palpitations, tensions in your body. You're like, aha, there is fear there. There is some fear in my brain of being awake, of not sleeping. Aha, you know? Or you might find that you learn the time and like nothing happened. There was really not much calculation or emotions. Then you're like, aha, there is less fear now. The fear has started to dissipate. Aha. And so you can look, knowing the time, seeing the time, you can turn this into just introspection, learning about yourself, learning about the brain, an ongoing self-exploration. And when you do that, you're no longer in the struggle, you're observing the struggle, you're learning from the struggle. So I think that can be a really practical way in this situation that I've shared this with many clients. All right, so I hope that helped, Dana. And that was the first question. And the second question was, Dana was basically saying like, I noticed that when I have trouble sleeping now, that there it's because there's some aspect of my life, maybe not necessarily sleep, but there's something I'm trying to control. Maybe trying to control emotions, maybe trying to control what's going to happen tomorrow, maybe trying to control other people's reactions. And that struggle with control leads in some shape or form to hyperarousal, some excitement, some nervousness, some worry, something like that. And then that keeps sleep from happening. So, how to address this? Yeah, I think it is just, I mean, you've already done it. Like, you already see that one of the things in life that we cannot control and we try to control them, that leads to struggle. And I think just awareness of this, kind of like we just talked about, knowing the time can be kind of a self-exploration. This can be too. When every time we are trying to control something we cannot control, we go like, aha, there was an attempt to control this. Aha, then the brain automatically on a subconscious level sees that the attempt to control is the struggle, and it automatically leads away from that. And so what you said here, Dana, about like there's still some aspect of my life that I'm still not kind of happy with. Should I just go all YOLO? Yeah, I think that is the way. I think the more we can be like, you know, seeing things not as a problem, but something we can learn from or something to just let be, then everything fades. Okay. So with that said, I think there was some things we could kind of like look in more detail uh, over here. Oh yeah, this one. I missed the feeling of nodding off or feeling sleepy. I think that's super, super common. And when we are in this, and when there is some hyperarousal, even if it's just a little bit of lingering hyperarousal, that can keep us from feeling sleepy. Curiosity can do the same. You know, maybe we're not scared or worried, but we're like curious, like, oh, I understand so much more. I'm not scared. I'm not scared anymore. So now I'll probably start feeling sleepy again. I'm curious about that. That can also lead us not feeling sleepy. So just knowing that not having that sleepy feeling is typical, nothing strange or unusual, and letting that be helps. Um, so we saw that. Oh, here, because of the I never got to uncouple the bed with my aroused state. And consequently, I still experience fragmented sleep. And I think what struck me here is that there can be an idea here that it's important to uncouple the bed with the aroused state. And this again is like a passive process. It happens when we're no longer trying to achieve it. But when somebody is like, I have to make sure that I don't associate the bed with being awake, or I can't associate the bed with anxiety. I have to do something about this. Then there's struggle. And then we're sort of keeping that dissolution of that association to happen by itself passively because we're trying to make it happen. So when we see that, oh, I don't have to do anything for the brain to not associate the bed with anxiety or something, there's nothing I have to do about that, then it can happen by itself. Okay, that was one thing. I still say about it. I think yeah, that was it. I think we have concluded this. So finally, then I said, which kind of implies that I'm not completely satisfied with my life just yet. And we're all humans. Like few of us will say that I'm completely satisfied with absolutely all aspects of my life. But that said, I think the more we all humans move towards like, yeah, there are things that I'm not entirely satisfied with, and that's okay. Maybe I can't do so much about them, and I can be okay with not being satisfied with them, or something like that. We can all kind of abandon the struggle a little bit like that. I think that can help. All right, hope that was helpful, Dana. Thanks so much for being here, and I'm so glad to hear that overall the struggle is much less intense now. Things are much easier now. Okay, Laura says, "Hi, Daniel. What would you suggest when having trouble finding an enjoyable neutral activity to start befriending wakefulness? Also, what are your thoughts on sleep having a pattern?" Very good and common questions there. I would say when when you're thinking like, okay, understand the concept of befriending wakefulness. I can do something when I'm awake at night that is enjoyable, is nice to do. That would kind of lessen the struggle. When you understand that this could be helpful, the next question can be like, so what am I going to do? And when you're thinking like, I could read a book, nah. I could watch some Netflix, no, I don't want to do that. I could get up and do some dishes, no, I don't want to do that either. When nothing seems kind of enjoyable, then, what can we do? Well, as you can probably guess, there's not a the answer here becomes like whatever feels like the least amount of struggle, I think, is the way. For some people it just means resting, resting with their eyes closed. For some people it means kind of being there with the anxiety, that type of thing, like, okay, I'm going to this is going to be time for me to talk to my feelings and acknowledge them or something like that. But maybe more importantly than not is to say that it's not at all important. It's not important to find something to do that makes you, enjoy your night or something like that. It easily can become another struggle. Like I have to find something to do. I have to find a good, neutral, or enjoyable activity, but I can't find that. So therefore, I can't do this befriending with this, and therefore I won't sleep. No, not at all. It's not important at all. Just this awareness alone, awareness that the more I try to make myself sleep, the more struggle I have. That awareness alone is so helpful. So those are some thoughts on that. Laura also said, "What are your thoughts on sleep having a pattern? What are your thoughts on sleep having a pattern such as weeks of initial insomnia or weeks of early awakenings, one sleepless night, etc.?" Yes, patterns are super common, and to me, well, some people have a sort of a baseline pattern. They say that my insomnia is like this as baseline, but what I think is even more common is that someone has a you know, some struggle with sleep, and then they start learning maybe on this channel or from reading my books or something else. Like they start learning about sleep, and then these patterns emerge. Right? Okay, I don't sleep one night, and I sleep one night, or I sleep very little for 3 nights, then I have one okay night, and then this happens, or something like that. We'll see if Laura said something specific. Weeks of initial insomnia, other weeks of early. Oh, and it's another thing. Okay, so you have weeks of like trouble falling asleep, then weeks of waking up early, and then maybe have one sleep cycle, etc. I think, first of all, I think it's super helpful to know that identifying patterns is super common, and a lot of the pattern comes from from kind of looking for a pattern or finding a pattern. Now, why is the brain kind of looking for patterns? Well, of course, that's part of like pattern. This is probably like problem solving, because to the brain, the brain has this idea that, aha, if I can see a pattern and figure out the pattern, then I can also see the solution to the pattern. So it's often very attractive for the brain to find patterns, because it can seem like it's onto something. And of course, when we're looking for a pattern, we see patterns. When we see patterns, those patterns are more likely to be repeated because there's some expectations around patterns, things like that. So the first thing, know that finding patterns is super normal. I think that's helpful. You know that there's nothing strange or unusual with finding patterns. Number two, I think, is uh, knowing that really all aspects of these patterns come from the same place. They all come from some fear or some anxiety. You can see that there are clues, that there are hidden clues, that, aha, first it was trouble sleeping, now it's first I had trouble falling asleep, now I have trouble staying asleep. This worked for that, what's going to work for this? Again, we see problem solving at work. uh, the brain is looking for a meaning in the pattern, and then if it finds the meaning, the hidden clue of the pattern, the brain thinks that it can then deploy something kind of like to counter it, and the problem will be solved. But in reality, there is no meaning. Whether we have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, choppy sleep, or random sleepless nights, it's all the same. It all comes from some fear of not sleeping, and it can express itself in different ways. Sometimes it can express itself as trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, choppy sleep, feeling unrefreshed. The fear of not sleeping can express itself in many different ways, but that doesn't mean anything more than that. It doesn't mean anything more than that. And so again, when we're not looking for a pattern and we don't interpret it as having any meaning, then it's much easier to let it go, and then the patterns resolve by themselves. Um, One last thing I want to add to the pattern is that I think particularly if someone has this like on off, like I sleep one night and I don't sleep another night, then this thing I call the pendulum method or the pendulum approach can be really helpful. But it can generally be helpful too. So what is this pendulum thing I'm talking about? Well, if you know the fundamentals here, which is that when you sleep easier, quote unquote better, when you sleep better, let's say, that just happens because you were trying less. Okay. And when you sleep less, so when you have a bad night, that just came because you were a little bit anxious, so you were trying a little bit more, let's say. And when you just remind yourself of this, then every night can be a sort of a learning experience for the brain. So let's say you had a night where you didn't sleep at all, then you meet that with nothing strange or unusual. There was just a little bit more attempts, more trying, a little bit more anxiety. That's all. No other meaning. And then you sleep easy, you sleep better. Then you're like, okay, I just see that there was less attempts at trying to control sleep. There was a little bit more um, you know, more acceptance of wakefulness there. That's why it's not better. And then you just repeat that every night. You just repeat this, and the brain will absorb that you know easy peaceful sleep. All that comes from not trying. So you kind of use every night as a teaching point like this. That's what I call the pendulum method. All right. Laura said, thank you for the work. Yeah, anytime. So glad it's been helpful to you, Laura. It really means a lot to hear this. All right, let's go to our last message for today, which comes to us from Diana. Diana says, this is Diana. Thank you for acknowledging my comments on your January 5th video. It has been about a month since I posted that comment, and I finished reading Set It and Forget It. I would like to provide an update. Good news! I'm celebrating over 4 weeks since my last sobbing, shaking, senseless nighttime panic attack. Yay! This is amazing. So glad to hear this. And magic always comes from the same place. It comes from education and understanding. And when we understand something, then there's no mystery. The brain isn't trying to problem solve it. And it also comes from, a little bit of courage, being willing to experience something that is scary, like a panic attack. That actually makes us have less of them. So good work there, Dana. Learning, finding some courage within. That's amazing. All right, challenges. A few days after I posted the comments, Beth and Michelle responded to it, and we had an early morning flight to return home. I expected that night of sleep to be rough because of the hyper-awareness of not missing a flight. It turned out I didn't sleep at all, but for a different reason. A relative called and said where we live had been hit by the tornado passing through the Mid-South. Instant anxiety, even though we were not there for it. The bedrooms had major damage, so returning to sleep in our own bed was impossible. For almost a month, we have had to sleep in different places while going through the rebuilding process. But this is where the teaching in the book helped me. I haven't been able to sleep well every night considering the circumstances, but I've not panicked either. I have been able to remain calm and compassionate, as Beth and Michelle recommended. The house will be repaired enough to move back in a week or so, but your teaching is helping me feel much more at peace, no matter what the sleeping conditions are. Thank you. Wow. Diana, this is amazing. I thought this was going to be there was going to be a question here, but I see it was really just a you just sharing how you contextualized all the teaching here and how it is showing the way. And I have nothing more to add. It's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing this, Diana. This means the world. Wow. All right. Some more live comments here. Ale. Tamara says, I just found about your channel, struggling with insomnia since 13 years ago. Where do I start to watch the videos? I have to see first. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I can write something down here. I believe I can. So if you go to the playlist of any video, including this one, you're going to find, in the description of any new video, you'll find some playlists. And there's one playlist called This Is Natto. That playlist, I think, is kind of the perfect place to start learning about the teachings here, the philosophy. So check out the This Is Now playlist. And then, of course, there's another playlist that is simply called Success Stories. And, disclaimer here, the word success is tricky because it's when we think of sleeping as a success, something to achieve, that we have some trouble. But you can think of it as like the success here is the success of being willing to experience some discomfort, success in finding peace in that, or something like that. Anyway, just a little disclaimer there. So my answer to you is like the This Is Natto and the Success Stories playlist. I think those are the perfect places to start for someone like yourself, Tamara, and let us know how things go. Absolutely. I'm so glad you're here and found the channel. Jake says, hi, a quick question. If I find a particular thing on the internet extremely anxiety-provoking regarding sleep, should I not visit it on purpose, or is that an effort? Yes, we see so much understanding here from Jake. Jake sees that, okay, when I read something on the internet that is like anxiety-provoking for me, then that might lead me to have some struggle sleeping. But what should I do then? Should I try to like avoid going back there? Or if I do that, am I just not teaching myself that there's something I should be afraid of, something like that. So I would say, kind of like a common sense approach here is helpful, meaning like, if you know that, you see like a headline that is kind of like a clickbait headline, like if you don't sleep, you're going to get this. then I would say, why read it, right? Why, maybe just deploy some self-kindness and just like, I'm not going to expose myself to that. Why would I do that? I think that's kind of commonsensical. But on the other hand, if someone starts going like, I cannot go on the internet because I might find something that's scary to me and will affect my sleep, then I think that's a tricky path, because that's the path of like trying to protect ourselves, and we avoid things. So I think having the courage to do whatever you want, be on whatever site you feel like, and that's great. But then also like common sense, like if you see something that this is just going to be trigger, I'm not going to learn anything, then maybe just skip it. I think that helps. Michael says, thank you for all you do. So educational. I'm 52, started experiencing some 2 years ago. I can fall asleep and wake up after a couple hours. My doctor says no worries, it doesn't cause health issues. And I think you might have commented, Michael, that I was like, wow, your doctor is like, that's amazing. Like so few doctors have this knowledge and understanding. So few doctors know that sleeping little, short sleep, insomnia has never been shown to cause any health problems. I've written a whole book about this called Why We Don't Sleep. So I cannot express strongly enough how happy I am to hear this. A doctor that sees this and understands this is amazing. So Michael, I think you're in very good hands there. Steven says, I'm going through speed bump. Any advice? I would say, and Tamara says, gracias de nada. Steven, I would say definitely say, we talked about playlists before. Check out our speed bump playlist. Check it out. And also check out the speed bumps playlist. And because there's so much more to say about speed bumps that I can't articulate here. And also Sierra, who is in one of the videos in the speed bumps playlist, she wrote me a really nice email yesterday that I'm going to share maybe tomorrow. Let me try sharing that tomorrow. And so listen out for Sierra's episode on speed bumps. I think that'll be helpful. So let's conclude there. It was so nice having you, and look forward to being back soon. Until then, take it easy.